Today I want to talk to you about organizational culture. What is it? What are some best practices for driving it forward? And what are some practical examples of what it looks like out in the wild? So my name is Anthony Taylor. I'm the managing partner at SME Strategy. We facilitate strategic planning sessions and we help teams implement their strategic plans. And one of the critical components of a successful organization is its organizational culture. Not only because it sounds good or it's like the right thing to do, but ultimately it really does drive performance and it'll help your team accomplish its biggest goals and its most important objectives. So being able to understand organizational culture, what it is, what drives it, is going to be critical for your success. So let's get into it. So what is organizational culture? It's the sum of all the values and beliefs that are shared throughout the entire organization. Okay, it's kind of like how we do things around here within your organization. Ultimately, it affects everyone, whether they're internal or external to your organization. Okay, so it's really like the guiding set of behaviors. Now, within organizational culture, you might have various subcultures, you might have various different beliefs, whether you have a small organization, large organization, internationally, you might have different cultures within that. But if we look at individual behaviors, those all combine together in terms of what guides your organization and drives the behavior within your people. That, in a simplistic way, is your organizational culture. Now, why is understanding your organizational culture important? Well, in the grand scheme of things, culture can provide a competitive advantage, as in it's one of those differentiators that, if all things were equal, culture would trump other organizations without an effective culture. Culture can attract talent. So if you have a positive culture or one that, attracts people, it can be good. Conversely, you can have a culture that can repel people. So by understanding how important culture is, you can use it to drive business results. Okay. Organizational culture tells people what's encouraged and acceptable, as well as what's not. So by formalizing those values and behaviors, and of course living them, which we'll talk about later, it serves as a guide and it serves as a decision-making tool for everybody within your organization. Now, the flip side of that is an ineffective or a toxic culture can lead to disengaged people. It can lead to higher turnover, bad customer service, and lower profits. So at the end of the day, most businesses, whether you're a for-profit or a not-for-profit organization, you're trying to have impact and make money, and culture really can be a significant driver to profitability or lack thereof. So to summarize, culture unlocks a lot of potential, or it can send you down a pathway of frustration and loss of money. So culture, in the grand scheme of things, pretty much controls everything. So the question then is, how do you use it to your advantage? Or if you're already kind of suffering from a negative culture, how can you move it in the right direction so that you can have positive benefits from it? So before we get into the how, I want to talk about, what culture is. So separate from individual behaviors, some of those individual behaviors kind of played in action. So the level of work-life balance is an indicator of culture. How people are recognized and compensated is a manifestation of the culture because it's going to show what you value and how you do things. The physical workplace shapes the culture, is also impacted by the culture. Your communication structure, if you have people who communicate well, there's probably a positive structure. If you have people who communicate poorly, it's probably a negative structure. The company's history and vision for a future. Organizations with negative cultures typically have a lot of bumps along the road, whereas ones with positive cultures have fast growth trajectories. In fact, they just did a study on the Inc. 5000 of the fastest growing companies, and there was a strong correlation to the fastest growing companies and their culture index. Okay. And then if there's opportunities to learn, grow, and develop. So if you take a snapshot of your own organization and look at these kind of 6 different areas, there are good barometers or indicators of how your culture is doing. If it's positive and moving things in the right direction, then you might have a good culture. And if it's not, you might not have one. But how does that manifest itself into bigger organizations? So I haven't worked for any of these organizations myself, but if you look in the news, you see, hey, there's kind of positive, good stories about it and bad stories about it. I could do a whole video about kind of positive and not so positive organizations, but when you read these stories, or if you do a quick Google, there'll be some things that you hear about that they do well. Again, work-life balance, communication, working conditions, salary raises and salary increases, and how the person feels within an organization. So this is just one of those examples that your culture, if it's good or bad, will kind of speak for you in the public domain. So whether you're a small or micro business or a large business, be aware of how important culture can be into the public perception and ultimately success of your organization. So we've talked a lot about what culture is, what it looks like, how it manifests itself. Now I want to give you some ideas on how you can actively shape it and move your culture in the right direction. Okay? So the first thing I want to encourage you to do is encourage specific behaviors. Okay, so my recommendation all the time is when organizations are doing strategic planning sessions, that you take the time to intentionally look at the values and behaviors that you want to foster and make sure that they're explicit. And then you want to make sure that those values and behaviors are contributing directly to your culture. Ultimately, it should shape how you want people in your organization to act. So if they don't have a clear understanding of what's expected of them, how could they act in line with that? So you want to reward values-aligned behaviors, and you want to address non-values aligned behaviors. A lot of times people go through this exercise of determining their values and behaviors of things that they want, but they don't attach a description of what it means. So it's important that you're explicit when you say, we value integrity. What does that mean? We value openness. What does that mean? We value work-life balance. What does that mean in practice? So that everybody in your organization, top down, understands what it means and what it looks like. Now, some people don't do that. Some people don't go through the process of identifying clear culture and behavior and then cascading it all the way down. So what ends up happening is that the employees follow and emulate what the leaders do. And where you get into problems with it is when the leadership says one thing and they do another. And so the rest of the organization has no idea how to act. So if you want to have a positive culture, if you want to have a culture that is consistent, you have to make sure that the leadership, probably you, is acting in line with the values and behaviors that you expect of others. Now, if you're watching this video and you're saying, oh my gosh, we have a terrible culture, there's a possibility that what your leadership says and how they act are two different things. And then there's a dissonance. And it's frustrating because you expect one thing and they expect one thing and do another. And as human beings, it doesn't kind of wire well in our brains, and then we get frustrated and then we ultimately quit because there isn't that leadership-driven alignment that needs to happen for successful organizational culture. So a couple other things that you can do, obviously making sure that you shape those values and behaviors internally first. And then if you really want to live those values and reward those values, you can get involved in the community and actually live the values that you say outside of the four walls of your organization. But most importantly, setting those expectations internally and then living them externally, having a clear mission and vision. So that's part of the strategic planning process, but making sure that your values, behaviors align with your mission and vision. That way you're going to tie your organizational productivity to it. And then help people develop the necessary skills. This is kind of an aside to culture, but one of the most frustrating things for employees is to be put in an organization where a lot is expected of them, but they're not given the support to do it. So while you might mean well, while you might have values and behaviors that ultimately support a positive behavior, if people in the organization aren't supported materially, whether that's with humans, human capital, or money, that even the best values and behaviors aren't going to help your people stick around because they just don't have what they need to help get the job done. So make sure you live the values, make sure that you've got the right system, structures, and support internally, and then make sure that you can get outside of the four walls and live that, whether that's with your community or your customers. So in summary, as we talk about organizational behaviors and what drives culture, culture is the sum of all of the behaviors in your organization. So just be aware. Even if there's a small subsection of troublemakers, that behavior is going to spread within your organization. And those values and behaviors drive everything in your organization. So it's the soft stuff, but it's the hard stuff. If you don't actively manage it, it will run you. So as a CEO, that's where I would recommend that's the first place that you focus to get your team moving forward. Foster individual behaviors first, because this idea of a company culture and an individual culture being different, it's just an amalgamation of individual behaviors. And your team will follow the leader. So if you're in a leadership position, make sure you're talking the talk and walking the walk. If you're not doing both of those things, then they're not going to know which way to act, and then it's going to get really frustrating and impossible to move forward. And ultimately, culture is going to drive the bottom line. So whether you're a for-profit or not-for-profit organization, you need to make sure that your values and behaviors and your organizational culture is tied in to your vision and mission, and you'll be able to move forward successfully. So, what I want to leave you with here as you move forward with that is, if you want to align your organization with your values and behaviors so that you can drive outcomes, talk to us about facilitating your strategic planning process. We can help you identify those values and behaviors. We can help make sure that they're tied into everything you do strategically and help you move forward to what you really want to get to. Values, behaviors, organizational culture are really like the key to unlocking so much success. The ROI behind it is huge. You just need to make sure that you take the right steps in order to move that forward. So I hope this video helps you better understand organizational culture, how to shape it, what some of the challenges are with it, and the pros and cons of not prioritizing it. And I hope you enjoy all of our videos. So if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe, follow along for some more videos, and I'd love to hear your comments on what you think the drivers of organizational culture are before. So drop them in the comments, and then be sure to reach out to us if you'd like to have a conversation. Once again, my name is Anthony Taylor from SME Strategy. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in our next video.